I now move on to the coordinating conjunction v. The conjunction in Hebrew is written using a vav, originally a wow as we know, but a vav, I'll pronounce it v. It joins directly to the word following it and is generally vocalized as like an inseparable preposition with a shavah under it. So for example, here you have a man and a woman, ish v'isha. And so the word and is the v with the shavah under it, and that's that. Or you could have the man and the woman does exactly the same thing. Unlike the inseparable preposition, it does not displace the article hey, but will simply be in front of it. Now, if you place it in front of a guttural with some sort of compound shavah, it will tend to take the vowel of the compound. So here you have shor, which is ox, and hamor, which is a donkey. And so if you want to say an ox and a donkey, it would be shor va hamor. Now normally you'd have a shavah here, but you have two shavahs in a row. You can't have two shavahs in a row. And in the case of a hataf type shavah, it'll take the vowel, the half vowel. So the half vowel is a patah, so it'll take the patah. So it's shor va hamor. Now if you put it in front of a word with a yod with a shavah, the rule of shavah will end up making it into a hirik. So here you have Yehuda. You start off with a shavah under the yod, and you would start off with a shavah under the vav. Well, the rule of shavah, two shavahs in a row, the first one becomes a hirik, so you make that a hirik. But once you do that, the yod could be considered a vowel letter, and therefore not need a shavah, and therefore you end up with just Vihuda and Judah. But then there's another rule that comes into play when you place the vav or the va in front of words that begin with shavah otherwise, like the word Shmuel, Samuel. If you want to say and Samuel, you'd expect it to be a vav with a hirik under it by rule of shavah. But it turns out that if the next word begins with a shavah, it tends to go to a shurik. So instead of getting Vish Shumel, you end up with Ushmuel. And so it's vocalized as a U. And then before the labials, the bet, the mem, and the pay, it also becomes a shurik. I actually have a name for this. I call it the bump plus shavah rule. So if you add a conjunction to a bet, to a mem, to a pay, or to a word that begins with a consonant with a shavah under it, you're usually going to get the U. That's the bump rule. So the bump rule will apply to a word like mayim. Mayim is the Hebrew word for water. If you want to say and water, well, because it begins with a mem, then the bump rule comes into play and you get umayim, and water. Now, there are certain constructions where they don't really follow the rules, particularly when you have two words connected by and that are closely connected with each other. It'll sometimes take a kamatz under the vav. So here you have the word for bread, which is lechem. So lechem and mayim, bread and water. And where those two words are kind of closely connected together, instead of getting the u, which is what you'd expect, you end up with a vav with the kamats under it. And these would have to be learned individually since they would be hard to predict. Well, how does one translate the conjunction? The translation of the conjunction depends largely on the word order and the context and the form. You can sometimes, most of the time, you'll translate it and. However, if you have something like in the book of Proverbs, the wise man does this and the fool does the opposite, well, it's making a contrast, and so there you could translate it but it's a matter of context. But then there are other usages of the word the. It can also mean now, or it can be basically disjunctive or parenthetic, giving, especially if there's a departure from the normal word order. We'll get into that when we get into translating actual sentences. Let me move on, go over the vocabulary. The word for gold is zahav. Don't have a whole lot to say about that. The word for Israel is Yisrael. You get all those syllables in there. Notice that it's a seen, not a sheen. Yisrael. And then silver is kesef. Silver by metonymy can also mean money. So since silver was used as money, it becomes a synonym for money. And then you have na'ar, youth or lad or servant. Basic meaning is a subordinate of some sort. A youth or a lad would be a subordinate, but it can also refer to servants, who are called boys, as it were. And then you have eved. That's the usual word for a servant or a slave. You get that in the word Obadiah, which is has the root of eved, and then also the word for Yahweh, Obadiah, servant of Yahweh. Related also the Arabic word Abdullah. Abdul is servant, related to Eved in Hebrew, and is related to Allah. The Ula at the end is a form of Allah, and so Abdullah means servant of Allah. And then another related cognate is avodah, which is work or labor or service. And then we've introduced a conjunction the, which means and or but or occasionally now. And then the zakain, an elder, or as an adjective old, and can refer as a noun to an old man. And then he introduces one other preposition, al, which means on or upon or over. It actually gives you a bunch of other glosses, against or by, and it's always joined with a makef. So it'll be al plus a makef, so that the accent will go on the following word. Now, the exercises, you're to attach the proper form of the conjunction to each word, depending on what goes there. And then in part B of the exercise, you are to read aloud and translate into English. So you'd read it aloud, mupo hayom hanashim po. And the first part is a question. Who is here today? Me is who? Po is here. Hayom is today. And then the next part is the answer. Hanashim po, the women, add the word are, po here. So anyway, you should read it aloud and then also translate each one of the sentences. And that's the exercises for Chapter 8. Again, if you have questions, make sure you post your questions on forums. And Shalom, Laherot. We'll see you later.